Hello and welcome to a hot bowl of tea, our second episode. Today I'm joined by Tom, a school friend of mine, where we discuss politics and the coronavirus. So,
I can't wait.
can't wait. You couldn't sound more posh. But so previous to this, Tom sent me a few questions. So we're going to discuss those. And our first one is about the media outrage towards Dominic Cummings. And what does it mean for the future MPs? Because obviously recently in the UK, we've had a bit of a scandal, should we say?
Yeah, pretty much media outrage.
Over Dominic Cummings, who went to go and visit his
Yeah,
family or his parents in Durham and travelled over 200 miles from London. And it doesn't really make any sense, as he's a chief advisor to Boris Johnson. And he's meant to be advising people to stay at home, and he's not following them. So the media had a bit of a fit about it. So, but they do love a good scandal, to be fair.
yeah, exactly. So I to ask ourselves is what this means for, like you said, for MPs in the future, because what we know is the media keep a close eye on everything MPs do. Like on their personal life, and everything that they say to the public and everything that they advise the public to do, they'll be expected to follow themselves, which, obviously that's fair. Now we have to decide what leeway are we allowing for almost natural human mistakes, or let's say, if an MP does slip up, how should we respond to that as a public? Because usually, let's say you have a mistake on your job, then you would go through a warning system before you. Whereas with Dominic Cummings, it's almost as if the mistake is so great that people just want to get rid of him instantly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not caught up about what happened, because I know many people have still gone to see their parents and still travelled, and like there's pictures of teachers during like bank holiday weekends. But I think it's more his sort of apology. It didn't make any sense. I'm going to go to a castle, but then it's like you shouldn't be encouraging that, and the fact that you're in a status that you're in, you need to be careful regardless of whatever happens. You can't. It's a bit of a silly move by him. You're literally going against what you said.
Yeah.
But from like an outsider's point of view, it doesn't seem reasonable or fair. Obviously, newspapers can't necessarily. They may be biased, or they may be. You can't. They twist things and everything, because news values are very important in this.
And then it's also difficult from, like you said, the news values. We know that the BBC is meant to provide both sides of the story, because they are like a nationalized news network, like they're owned by the government essentially. So they're meant to be a 50-50. However, again, they weren't. Some people would argue that they weren't being a 50-50 broadcasting network when covering the story of Dominic Cummings, as it looked like it was all just bashing him. So that Dominic Cummings was scrutinized by the BBC maybe too heavily, when the BBC is meant to be an impartial network.
From my personal opinion, is I don't really care what other politicians or celebrities, because I don't really care what people do, and any member of the public, as long as I know I'm like social distancing and I'm like keeping safe, I don't really care what they're doing. But I think it's just the fact that they're in a sort of they're in a very powerful position to then do something that they've said not to do. Even though they have relaxed the lockdown slightly, the media twists everything anyway. I think
it's interesting that they have this want to make him look bad, and it's like, where do you think this is from? Because he is the most powerful unelected official in the country.
Yeah.
And that, you know, may be a contributing factor as to why the media don't like him, because no one really elected him into that office, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's almost like, where do you think like that hate comes from for Dominic Cummings?
I don't think the government acted particularly well towards the coronavirus as such. I think they were too lenient on things compared to other countries, and we will get onto that. Actually,
yeah, that's a good segue.
Yeah, but then you can't necessarily. Okay, a death rate could have been a lot higher and a lot worse.
Yeah,
and we do talk about Sweden, but we still have the highest death rate in Europe.
Yeah,
compared to like Italy and Spain, they locked down, and even their death toll was huge. And we could have, and we literally sat there watching it happen and carried on with our lives. Like, can't we? Surely we should be able to reduce that and try and restrict our death toll. And they didn't. The government weren't strict enough soon enough. The hindsight's an amazing thing, and the should have is very powerful.
Like that's like the main critique during coronavirus is going to be they should have done things sooner. But then, like, you could say that to almost every country. That's like applicable almost everywhere. You could also say that to like when people are dealing with floods or evacuating from hurricanes or something. You're like, it's a really difficult thing to handle. And with regards to how this country handled it, like the measures that we put in place needed a lot of almost cooperation from the people themselves, if that makes sense. So like we almost weren't strict enough in the sense that if people didn't want to obey these, they didn't have to, in a way. And even now, when you're allowed to go and visit one person outside, there are groups of 10 and 20, just walking around like as if lockdown was never on. And also, like that brings me on to something else, because I was on Twitter the other day, and there exactly, and there were two hashtags trending at the same time, right? And one of them was Boris has failed, aka like critiquing Boris for like not doing enough. And the hashtag underneath that was hashtag police state, which was critiquing like them for doing too much.
I don't think this lockdown has been very police state like, as from compared to other countries like Italy. They weren't allowed. They literally weren't allowed to go out of their house. And Dubai, they needed permits. They literally couldn't leave their houses. Spain, they were put on lock. They were like, you could only one person of household could go to the shop. And there was a lot more. Everything was shut all of a sudden in Spain. But what did we do? We've shut pubs and restaurants, but we haven't closed off like Hyde Park or wherever, and that's for like exercise and to go out and have a walk. But then there's that, and then there's taking the mick out of it and sitting there having a picnic.
And I feel like a lot of people in this country are prone to taking the mick out of it almost.
And that's just a British public, really, isn't it?
And it's as if the powers to lock down properly, like the country, like China can lock down well because it's effectively like a military state, right? It's a one-party state, and they already have certain surveillance things in place where they can just lock people down. Whereas, right, so that brings like us onto Sweden, like we were going to say that earlier, where like the reason Sweden didn't lock down in the same way like Italy did or China is because from what I've read, they didn't have that in their constitution. Like they couldn't legally lock down, otherwise that would have been an illegal action on like the side of.
said in Sweden, is it the epidermatologist Andrew?
Yes.
He said that they never really calculated the high death toll initially, and the death toll actually came to a surprise to them.
Damn.
So but if I don't, they've got 4,220 deaths, which I saw yesterday, but I don't know what it is obviously today. But surely, if you can see other countries like Italy had massive, Spain was huge. If you look at America, they have over 100,000 deaths.
Yeah, that's insane.
Right.
That's like, and I think it's partly due to, they like to run things on a state-by-state basis, and their lockdown policy is actually enforced on a state-by-state basis. So you could go to one state and have the local government telling you to do a different thing, and then you could go to another state and then you could be free to meet with your friends in that state. Like there's
it's like
no
that inconsistency
thing. Yeah.
Even the British government has been scrutinised for not being clear enough in their speeches and their briefings. It's like the clarity is not there, and it's so inconsistent across the world, but it's all going to affect the countries in near enough the same way, because people are still going to die.
And like we haven't even seen the virus almost roll out into Southern America and parts of Africa and things like that. We don't really know how they're going to be affected. It's sort of spread up from China and across, and then into North America, and it's still like we're still just beginning to happening in the Southern Hemisphere.
But they're like the heavily populated, the more developed countries, really.
But
then look at the testing rate as well. But America has a higher testing rate than Sweden does.
Wow.
I think it was the testing rate out of 20.78 out of 1,000 people were tested in Sweden, but America's 36.96 or something, which is
that could also be to do with, like we said earlier, that the British population are going to have a certain amount of skepticism towards the government and not follow everything exactly. Whereas,
but I don't know if they've already got a bit of resentment anyway towards them because of like Brexit and what they the thing with Theresa May. There was sort of everything was a bit up in the air.
It's going to be interesting how this is going to affect the Tory party and sort of the system we have now, because we've had 15 years or something of like Tory majority, and we may see that in the next general election, that because the coronavirus could push everything off the edge. Now, what will be interesting is whether the Brexit negotiations will be done entirely by the Tory party, or if Labour do get in 5 years, how will that affect like the previous decisions made with withdrawing us from the European Union? I think people are willing to almost see the effects and what they are. And then I think we'll wait like is, and the conversation will come back and people will want to start talking about it again.
I see that.
I think
I feel like this has been put on the back burner though, hasn't it? Everyone's forgotten about it.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. And I actually think...
And then as soon as it's over, it'll be like Brexit again.
They're not moving the deadline for the negotiations, meaning if coronavirus spills over, then we'll be leaving on no deal if we can't get an agreement passed, which at the moment we can't because of coronavirus. So it's almost as if everything is just Dominic Cummings' big plan.
Fire him because of how he's literally made Boris Johnson in charge. But then you see like other politicians have actually resigned. Like the junior minister, Douglas Ross, he resigned, didn't he? In like a government protest, was it? So even their own party aren't particularly happy with the way he's acted or the way perhaps the Conservative Party has reacted to this situation or how it's been
Exactly. Yeah,
But,
and like definitely within the party itself, there is a narrowing of like the consensus, if that makes sense. So there's not as much diversity in terms of opinion within one party, because what's happened is you have to be fully in support of Leave in order to kind of be in cabinet with Bojo right now.
Good old Bojo.
Exactly. So there's no kind of opposition within the party itself. But now we're seeing 61 MPs.
Didn't he fire someone as soon as his
trying
stuff
to
kicked
get
it off?
Dominic Cummings out. Yes, he did. He did some sort of marketing like representative or something. It's difficult, but then on the other hand, we have to, it was not long ago when we were all preaching the hashtag Be Kind movement and everything, and like we have to ask ourselves, is it right that when people do something wrong, we're asking them to instantly resign despite what good they may have done in some other like area of the country?
His statement, I don't know why he did that statement. He did.
Yeah, that probably did him more harm than good. Right? There may have been a chance that it would have died down more had he not done that interview.
All the news reporters were like outside his home, which I completely disagree with. I don't think news reporters should ever go to a politician's house and sort of bombard them. I don't care what you're under spotlight all the time if you're a celebrity, but there is no need to like go after someone's private life. But that's another
and they also weren't following the 2 meter distance rule themselves outside the house.
No, but no one's following it now.
It's
I see it at work all the time. No one's following it. It's ridiculous.
It's a difficult situation.
They have marks on it. They stand next to me. I'm like, go away. Dominic Cummings, that's our scandal in the UK. But what I also don't understand is in America, they're not locked down, especially in New York. And there's protests, and good old Donald Trump said that, like, inject yourself with disinfectant or goodness knows what else. And some he just said it doesn't exist. But what I don't understand is that they've actually, on the 13th of March, he actually said it was a national emergency. It's like, okay, so why are you so relaxed about it? And then like on the 14th, so the next day, he passed like health relief, and he invested loads of money into helping those people that have been furloughed, or he's actually put loads of aid out there. So it just doesn't make any sense to me why they've not locked down and they're not taking it seriously, but yet they've announced it's a national emergency. They've passed like relief aid to those in the country. They've invested money into like medical, like the medicine and medical over there, and like testing as well. But I'm like, you're just contradicting everything you're saying with the policies you're doing.
And better yet, then they're protesting like the fact that they're forcing them to stay at home. Yes, exactly. So you need to be willing that the rights you normally have essentially apply to normal times more so than they can be applied to times of emergency, where for like the good of all people, everyone should stay at home. And like it's unfair to say that that's infringing on your rights when essentially what you're doing is you're taking away someone else's right to life because you're putting other people in danger.
Trump is kind of supporting them because he's not saying stay indoors, don't do this. So he's almost giving them a free pass. But obviously, as you said, it depends on the area. And
we might see, because they're starting to roll out an app where people can like track and test or whatever, we might see a more localized sort of lock in the future where every time there are cases or something coming up, we'll just be in like the certain parts of the country will be in lockdown and others not. And now that we're going to like the more localized approach, right, with the apps, like with the Southwest, like you said, we might see, because we don't have governors in the same sense that the US has, right? So we might see that the councils or something start to play a larger role. Because right now, apart from, like rubbish bins here and there, and maybe a few housing issues, you don't see them in your day-to-day life, the councillors, right? And what's interesting is the constituency has a group of councillors, and it's sometimes hard to see in what way they're contributing, and maybe that will come out more during like the aftermath of the coronavirus,
Yeah. I mean, that is a good point. But then also with the local lockdown, should we say it? I don't know how they will be able to. Obviously, with the UK, you can travel anywhere.
Yeah.
Like anywhere, really easily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how are they going to control that and stop people from coming in or coming out? But maybe you live in one area, but then you need to go to work in another local area. So I don't know how they would necessarily control that, especially with key workers, because obviously key workers are the most vulnerable and the most likely people to spread it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how not that how effective it would be, but how much it would work in a sense.
Yeah, and it's difficult.
That makes sense.
Like, are you going to, if you lock down a place and all the people in that place travel to London to work there, are they going to like lock down that bit of London, or like make all those people not go to work and then have, because like most people that work in London don't actually live in London. You might even see also like in the same way, we might just see masks becoming part of life now. It already were in some parts of Asia. Like that might just be a thing on public transport and other things now. And like maybe more socially distanced, like services and things, like if they can socially distance, they might just continue to do that just for the general safety of people anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's almost like one of those kind of facts of life. Like it was almost our time to have another virus if you look at when all the other previous ones have been. And what's interesting about that is that there is no one, like you said, there's nothing we can put a clear blame on, and it's almost something we, like should have united as like as a world, if that makes sense.
An education on it, because the more you drill it into people, and if you show them the harsh realities, more likely people are going to do it. But that has 37,460 deaths, and they're on 33,072 deaths. So it's like we saw it, we saw what could happen.
But
and
it almost have an old population,
like,
so like the amount of people who have lost their lives to this, it's insane. It when people read out those numbers, it's almost as if they're reading out the weather. Like it's like insane at this point. It's an inconceivable amount of people where it almost feels like just numbers, and we have to remember that those were all people, and how is that going to affect like the government strategy going forward and afterwards? Like are we going to see an apology or something? Because actually this is interesting, because we saw the French Prime Minister actually gave a formal apology about his conduct during the coronavirus.
Yeah, but then as soon as the government do that, they've admitted to mistakes. That's the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's obviously something they want to avoid, especially what's gone on with Dominic.
Exactly. And I think that because it's not clear enough, that's making it hard to say who's to blame in reality, because I don't think it would be fair to put 100% of the blame on varying organizations and stuff like that, because as we said, you can always say with hindsight, you should have done things earlier.
Yeah. And I think the government aren't fully to blame for this. They've given the advice,
exactly,
they've taken the advice, but then if people misuse that advice and take it for advantage, like they've clearly taken his thing about relaxing the lockdown slightly as a complete advantage, and it just goes against it all.
Where's the balance between people's intentions and how they've acted?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's loads of takeaways we've got from this. I mean, not only that it's hard to put blame on people, but whether that's a productive thing to be doing, and also like how this is not only going to affect life afterwards, but also things like Brexit in like 30 years time, and whether all the issues that have been sidetracked because of this virus, how in like what form will they come back, and how will we begin to reevaluate things, and maybe our approach to like other, or like you almost want to call it a natural disaster, right? That's almost what it is. Like we should almost have a minister, you know how like we have a minister of health and all of that. This, like, the virus should almost become under like the Ministry of Defense. Do you know what I mean? Like this should almost be a place where those powers are reserved for the Minister of Defense. Because essentially what this is a biological like security failure. Right. And I think it's going to have a lot of unintended consequences for the future. Like we said, with people locking down locally, and what that will mean for councils and local communities. Exactly. And hopefully they will be learned.
I mean, even to apply, not necessarily if there's a worldwide pandemic, even just with other things, of even just being more united as a world or a nation, because there has been some real nice acts of kindness during this, and maybe that will carry on, and hopefully it does.
We have to come out of this more united. Exactly. And we have to have faith in organizations such as the World Health Organization and places like that, because at the end of the day, we have to realize that you have to listen to the scientists.
And I think that's a lesson to be learned. You have to listen to science. You can't, and the science says social distance, be careful, and I feel like the government are using this sort of disaster, should we call it a disaster, as a thing to give them more credit for perhaps maybe their mistakes, or more credibility.
I almost want to say, stop giving the health workers praise, give them a raise.
Do you
know what I mean? That could be a good slogan, right? Like, don't praise, raise. That needs to be the takeaway from some of the things we've experienced, and especially some of the hospital staff that's been working
and like help them out during difficult times.
And all we can hope for is that even if they do spin it selfishly, like you said, that some positivity comes from that, some sort of sense of unity comes from that, some sort of like on the other side, we have to acknowledge that we can go through this as a nation and come out, we have to try and come out better.
I think that concludes the end of our show. So thank you, Tom, for being a guest today. No worries.